caretakers, peanut crew, used big carts with heavy iron wheels and rattling metal garbage cans dragged across the floor. Made this kind of rumbling, clattering sound that if you were thinking pretty press, you see, you would think that. So my magician's background is useful in some of these cases as illusions. But what about the footsteps on the stairs? Well, next door, in a building about 40 inches away, is a parallel iron staircase. So when the late night peanut crew would go up and down their staircase, from back over here, you would hear the sound over there. No instance the sound is so precise that you could tell 40 inches closer or further away. And this was an iron staircase, freestanding iron staircase, and made quite a noise. People tromped up and down. Now you would think that someone would have caught on to this, but the people in the house, the caretakers, were superstitious and they believed in ghosts and that they would go in the other direction. If I heard a noise, I would go find out what it was. They would go away from it, you see. So I went next door and I found the caretaker, building next door, named Tony. And I said, Tony, why didn't you come forward? I said, newspapers had done stories on McKinsey House. There was an exorcism here. Susie Smith came and wrote a book with a chapter on McKinsey House. There have been witches and warlocks. For heaven's sake, today the ghost hunters would be all over that place. And no doubt would find ghosts in every nook and cranny. Why, I said, did not you come forward since you told me you suspected all these things? And he said, well, he didn't feel it was that he was required to rain on other people's parade. But he said, if I resolved that if anyone came and asked me, I would tell them. And I said, no one ever did. A building that's 40 inches away from a house that's having noises and stuff. He said, that's right, you're the first one. And I thought, this is what you do. You actually go on site. You don't go to dismiss. You can dismiss from at home. You can dismiss from an ivory tower or your computer terminal. No, you actually go. And you be respectful of people, and you see what's going on, and you try to explain it. And I thought, if you do that, people will believe you, and they will love you for it. Yeah, it didn't work out. Not quite that way. But some people have listened to it. Well, what about the caretaker's wife waking up and seeing a ghost? Well, this is an old 19th century print of just such a thing, and this is a very, very common phenomenon. How many of you have heard of a phenomenon called a waking dream? Okay, nearly everybody. Anybody who hasn't? Okay, a couple of people. Well, let me explain it quickly. Because this is kind of unusual to have such a high percentage, but I guess I have a bright, skeptical audience. But many times at colleges, I've had an auditorium of a couple of hundred people, and very few people have heard of waking dreams. Then I ask, how many of you have heard of sleepwalking? And all the hands go up. Everybody's heard of sleepwalking. Well, they're similar but opposite effects. They both occur in the twilight between being fully asleep and fully awake. So in sleepwalking, your mind is asleep, but your body's awake enough to go out walking in the yard in your jammies. In a waking dream, the opposite is true. You're conscious of being awake. That is, you will swear you were not dreaming. You will swear you were not dreaming. And in the normal sense of things, you are not. You're not having a normal dream. But your body is shut down, and you may often feel unable to move because your body is still asleep. It's called sleep paralysis. We can trace this back in the Middle Ages. People believed that demons called incubuses and succubuses were sitting on their body, sitting on their chest, or lying on their body, holding them down. Because when you wake and you're unable to move, you hallucinate an explanation. And that was the one that was so common in the Middle Ages. In the Victorian era, people were transfixed with fear or unable to move because of the ghost of the Great Lady. Today, guess what's happening? Very common.
Aliens?
Aliens. Aliens have them strapped down, you see, and there are aliens around, and they see them as real as I'm seeing you. This is the quality of a waking dream, a really good one. People really see these non-existent things. Joseph Smith saw the angel Moroni and found in the morning bed. Here at Mackenzie House is one of the warlocks, self-described. And you see the ghostly mist from his fingertips. But analyze this picture with me. Notice the very black shadows. Notice the very bright glare off the woodwork, and you can deduce that this picture was made with a flash. It's clearly a flash picture, and therefore, you can see what's happened. These white sheets of music have simply bounced that very bright light back and washed out, so to speak, an area of the picture. That's all it is. And I had a professional examine this. There's no question about it. You could duplicate it, you could do it. And yet, it's thought to be, by a lot of people, oh, what caused that mist? Looks like a mist. Now, that's all that's going on with such pictures. Now, while I'm on ghost pictures, I want to take you back a little bit. The earliest photographs were some experimental pictures, and there were no ghosts in them. Then, and probably you know this, the earliest commercial successful photographs were called daguerreotypes. There were no ghosts in daguerreotypes. And then ambrotypes were invented, and there were no ghosts. Ghosts were too shy or unable to show up in the ambrotypes. Then there were tintypes, very popular in the Civil War and on up through the century. Again, ghosts did not show up in tintypes. And then, about 1860, glass plate negatives were invented. Glass plates, making double exposures possible. Whereupon the ghost decided to appear frequently in photographs. And the first such pictures were made by a spiritualist and photographer in Boston named William Mumler. And Mumler had an idea. He apparently discovered this accidentally. He was recycling his glass plate negatives. In other words, you clean the emulsion off, re-emulsify it, re-dip it, and make a new picture. So if people didn't want their old pictures, you recycle the glass plates. They were quite expensive and so forth. Well, one day, Mumler discovered that if you didn't clean the emulsion off really well, you could have a faint extra, he called it, in the picture. And so he had an idea. And pretty soon he was selling spirit pictures. Pose for a photo, and spirits would appear behind you in the picture. And a famous one of his most famous ones is one of Mary Todd Lincoln with the recently assassinated Abraham Lincoln standing with his hands on her shoulder. And of course, it's fake. Well, Mumler was undone when some people recognized that some of his spirits in his pictures were still living Bostonians. That was the end of Mumler's career. He was charged, and though he eventually got off, he got a fair warning. Here is a non-Mumler spirit picture from my collection. And one of the things you can notice with such a spirit picture is that they're usually either posed low in the picture and the spirits are above it, or in this case, posed way off center. So there was room for the spirit. And so it's a clue. How did the photographer know just where the spirits were going to pose before he took the picture? And the answer is because he was putting